welcome to the Dashboard Effect. I'm Brick Thompson.
And I'm Landon Ochs.
Hey, Landon, today we wanted to talk about Fabric and Snowflake. Here at Blue Margin, we do development in both systems. Sometimes it's sort of a toss-up which one to use. We go with client preference, or they've already got, they've chosen one, they're already building in that. Sometimes we need to advise the client on which way to go. Sometimes, again, it's a bit of a toss-up which way to go, but there are certain cases where it makes more sense to go with one or the other, and so I thought we'd talk about that a little bit today. You were just out at the Build Conference actually only a month and a half ago at this point. Got a lot of new input on Fabric, a lot of updates there. We're feeling good about Fabric at this point. There was maybe a couple years ago, still had a lot of holes, so we still found ourselves in Synapse on Azure a lot, but now Fabric is the way to go. So what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think, in general, both Snowflake or Fabric, to your point, is going to do a great job with whatever you're trying to do analytics-wise, central data repository, all of that good stuff there. But there are certain things where one excels over the other, and each company is going to be different, so yeah, we can definitely jump into some of those.
So we're only going to take about 10 minutes a day, but let's just talk high level. What are the types of things that you look at to recommend a company go with one or the other?
Definitely, yeah. So one of them is kind of like, what does your existing ecosystem look like? Are you very ingrained in Microsoft, very heavy Microsoft shop? You use Azure, Office 365, all of the Microsoft suite of tools. Fabric could be a good choice for you because it's, integrated into all of those, right?
Yeah.
You're already there, and it plays incredibly well with all of them. Their AI can talk to a lot of them, so you get advantages with that. Whereas conversely with Snowflake, you're looking at, you have multiple cloud platforms. You
so
might
you
have
might
some
be
on
AWS, Google, Azure, whatever.
Yeah, you might have multiple. You might have just different ones that aren't Microsoft focused. That's where Snowflake comes in a little bit better because, you can put it on any cloud. It's cloud agnostic, be Azure, AWS, Google, which gives you some advantages if you have that kind of multi-cloud ecosystem. And then the other thing too to think about is, do you want to use a bunch of different tools that aren't necessarily Microsoft, right? Like Fivetran, different reporting platforms, all these kind of different tools out there.
So Fivetran for your data pipelines instead of the Jupyter Notebook pipelines or Data Factory pipelines, that type of thing. And then reporting systems. Power BI is what you're going to use if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem. In fact, even if you're using Snowflake, most companies will use Power BI, but Snowflake just bought Sigma.
Yeah, exactly.
So they have their own tool now, and you could certainly use Tableau on Snowflake, those types of things. Same with, you can use Tableau on Azure as well.
Yep.
So anyway, you can mix and match. So sometimes still it's probably a bit of a toss-up. I'm sure there are cases actually where you're a Microsoft shop, but you'd rather use Snowflake for some reason. They've got some tools maybe that work better for your use cases.
Yeah, which will work, right? There's no saying you can't go. Like there's no limitation saying you can't do this. This would be more so in the scenario of I have no idea which one to go for. That might help you see which one might be a little more appealing for you.
Yeah. I know one of the considerations is around budgeting. Snowflake, I think in years past, sometimes had a reputation as being kind of expensive compared to Microsoft. I don't think it's necessarily that way anymore, but I know with Microsoft, at least in Fabric, you can cap your monthly spend based on the capacity you buy, and the system won't let you spend more than that. It'll actually throttle down or even stop if you go too hard. And you'll have to increase your capacity. Whereas with Snowflake, I think you can just keep spending. It's not necessarily more expensive, but let's say you made a mistake and started some process that's going to run for 14 hours by mistake, and you didn't notice that. You could end up using a lot of the capacity that you've paid for.
Yeah, that's right. You can set up budgets in Snowflake where it'll warn you and say, hey, you're over this now, but
will it
then
stop?
Somebody's got to jump into action.
It won't shut it off.
No.
Okay. Whereas Microsoft, it sort of does. I mean, it borrows from future capacity to a point, and then it says, okay, and it's sending warnings, but then it has to stop.
Yeah. Microsoft's Fabric is a little bit more confusing. We could have a 30-minute discussion on that alone. But yeah, it will stop you eventually where if you're going over that.
So do you think cost is a deciding factor at this point? Or is it just that you have to manage your costs differently in each system and just make sure you're doing that correctly for the system?
I would say managing costs personally. I think with Fabric coming up to speed and Snowflake with this kind of getting better cost control mechanisms in there, they're a lot more level at this point.
Okay, great. All right, that's great to hear. I know some developers far prefer Snowflake.
Mm-hmm.
There's some nice ease of use things for development. I was going to say maybe it's less friendly to your average business user, but they also have an AI tool that if you set it up correctly with the YAML file to get the metadata to the AI tool so it knows all about the tables and columns and relationships and so on, business users can use that too. I think it's kind of the same with Fabric, though. You're not going to have your average business user sort of diving into Fabric, although you are going to connect them to the semantic layers, maybe to do some reporting in Excel or Power BI.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one plus side that you have with Fabric is with your capacity, you do get access to Copilot, with a Power BI Pro license. If you're using Power BI and Snowflake, you don't have Copilot. And that does give business users some way to at least explore the underlying model when they're looking at a report. So it's more friendly, it's in a place that they're used to accessing.
Yeah. And setting up the data for Copilot, at least as my understanding currently, as of today, July 1st, the Copilot, Microsoft's Copilot will do a lot more inference about the data structures and will do its best to guess how things are related to each other and so on. Whereas in Snowflake currently, you need to do all of that setup behind the scenes to make sure it works right. You could make an argument that that's better because you'll be less likely to get a mistake or a hallucination.
Yeah.
But it does take more setup and maintenance. So you sort of have to judge your use case there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you're talking to a new client for us, how do you decide where to go?
Yeah. I mean, it's a really good question, right? Like if they have no idea which one they want to go with, really the two biggest things, or I guess three biggest things for me would be, what's your current setup look like? Which we talked about earlier. How's your budget? Are you okay with variable costs per month for this thing? And then finally, how interested are you in having your just everyday users be able to interact with AI a little bit? Would be my biggest kind of questions.
So the first two I think are pretty easy to interpret, but let's say someone said, I really want my users to interact with AI. Are you saying, okay, let's go Fabric because Copilot can sort of work out of the box?
Where it currently is, I would say, Fabric is going to be a little easier for your everyday, non-technical person to be able to interact with it. And it's less maintenance, If you're AI heavy, there's less maintenance in Fabric to have the AI kind of work. If you're not, it's actually kind of almost flips, right? There's less maintenance in Snowflake, to just have your platform serve up data to reports.
Yeah. Okay. This could all be different in a month or two.
It's changing so fast.
Right,
so
okay. So you have to just keep an eye on that and do your best to forecast. I think it's safe to say no matter which system you go with, they're going to be around. They're going to keep developing. This is not sort of taking a risk on some new platform and hoping that it's still around. You could end up in some weird sort of technical debt back, cul-de-sacs by mistake. It just happens. I mean, you see that with every tool, even Synapse, which, was the main tool we were using for years. And now they're supporting it, but not developing it anymore at Microsoft because they're going full into Fabric. And so things that were built on Synapse are going to keep working, but at some point there's the technical debt of probably wanting to migrate to Fabric. And I know there's some tools for that, and those will get better, but you still have that. That could happen with Snowflake. I don't know of an analogous thing there, but there could be those types of things as well.
Yeah. I mean, in either platform, you can really rely on a feature that eventually is going to get retired or replaced with a new one, right? So that you're always going to have that kind of risk.
So let me ask you this. So as a back-end developer, as a data engineer, do you have a preference where you work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now, I do think both are going to be good. But if my completely unbiased opinion.
Is it unbiased?
Well, yeah, I guess maybe a little biased, but it's different than what we've been working in. You know, I do enjoy the very hands-off approach you can take with Snowflake.
Okay, does a lot of stuff for you.
Yeah, a lot
really
of
good magic in there.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Fabric, you need a little bit more hands-on approach to make sure you're not gonna go over your capacity and start having throttling and then eventually a full shutdown, right?
Yeah. So if you're familiar with Azure or Fabric, okay, fine. But if you're sort of new to this, maybe you'd go Snowflake.
Yeah, if you've got a very, very good team, or you know you're working with a company that's very good at it, Fabric absolutely is a great way to go. But Snowflake, you can be a little more hands off. It just works, right?
Interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how this develops over time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Microsoft sort of thought they had this, like they were the clear leader with Azure and Synapse, and then Fabric coming in. Did we first hear about Fabric 2 years ago, something like that?
I lose track of time, but yeah, something like that.
And it seemed like, okay, that's going to be the thing. And then Snowflake has been coming on hard for a few years now, really doing a great job. They do a great job commercially. They've got really good sales teams and approach and really good development, technical development. I mean, they're not just sitting there, you know, selling marketing fluff. They've got great stuff that works. I almost wonder if Microsoft is feeling in the position now with Fabric of, okay, we need to keep up with Snowflake or stay just ahead. Or I don't know how they consider themselves.
Yeah.
It's an interesting race, and I think, you know, as so many of these things in software, the consumer, the business consumer, ends up being the winner there because they're competing to sort of dominate that market. No, Databricks is in there too, and there's other systems, but it does seem like those two, at least for the type of work we do right now, sort of mid-market, upper mid-market, some enterprise work, those are the two that we're working in. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think we and our clients will all benefit from that.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, they're gonna be battling, and it's gonna produce a lot of really cool things, I think.
Yeah, it's super fun to work in. Okay, any final thoughts?
No, I don't think so.
I think we'll come back to this topic over the next few episodes. There's so much detail in here. I was looking through your notes that you and your team have been compiling on the two systems. We could go deep. I meant for this to be high level. We sort of went in and out a bit, but we'll come back and do some deeper dives on various aspects of these tools at a later episode.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Landon.
Thank you.
See ya.